Hello, and welcome to the Future Christian Podcast, your source for insights and ideas into what it means to live as a follower of Jesus in the 21st century. At the Future Christian Podcast, we talk to pastors, authors, and other faith leaders for helpful advice and practical wisdom to help you and your community of faith walk boldly into the future. Here's your host, Lauren Richmond Jr.
Welcome to the Future Christian Podcast. My name is Lauren Richmond Jr. Today I'm pleased to be joined by Reverend Elizabeth Hagan. Elizabeth is a graduate of Duke Divinity School and has been a pastor for 15 years. She saw and personally experienced the isolation, loneliness, and shame that remains unspoken when Christians shy away from difficult conversations. She knew that church could do better to foster a sense of acceptance and belonging. To that aim, she's written 2 books to help open the door to the presence of God in difficult situations. She's the author of Birth, Finding Grace Through Infertility, and Brave Church, which we'll be talking together here shortly. The Brave Church, Tackling Tough Topics Together. So we will be talking about that together in our time. So welcome to the show, Elizabeth Hagan.
Hey, Lauren. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here. Well, what else would you like our listeners to know about you?
Well, I'm a person who's done a lot of cool things, but I've also learned new tricks in adulthood. And so one of the things that recently happened to me is that I did not know how to ride a bike. I grew up we were just chatting, you were telling me you were in Denver. You understand, I grew up in Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is a very hilly region. And we lived on this inclined driveway. My parents really weren't outdoorsy. And anyway, I just wanted to ride a bike, so I'm pretty excited about that. I'm a mother to a girl that just turned 5, and she learned to ride a bike. We learned to ride a bike about the same time. So
Awesome.
That is one of my most exciting accomplishments of recent.
What kind of bike did you get?
Well, at this point, I don't own a bike, but I was borrowing friends. But, just the fact that there's so many cool things you can do with bikes, right?
Yes.
Like you can, rent a bike and do a city tour or, have a bike at the beach or something like that. So
you need to get a bike. I love riding. It's great just to be outdoors. Well, cool. Congratulations. And
well, thank you.
There's going to be a lot of exciting stuff. I will say, like anything in America, it can be like a black hole of like purchases and consumerism.
Yeah. My husband likes that. He gets into a hobby and then he needs all the things. And I'm like, okay, let's take a step back and make sure that we're totally into this unless we're getting all the things. But, professionally, I'm a pastor that really enjoys being a part of communities of people with open hearts who are doing the work of deep conversations. I have served local churches. I have served in other positions and nonprofits throughout these years I've been ordained. And, being ordained was a really big deal for me. I remember the night before my ordination service, and I thought, wow, I think my life's about to change. And my friends thought I was a little dramatic. They're like, you're doing a job. But, the covenant that you make when you say that this is going to be your vocation for your life, no matter what it looks like, it really does shape how you view whatever jobs or work you do or how you even interact with your friends or family. And I've been doing this for over 15 years, and it's a calling I can't shake. It's something that's really important to who I am and what I do. And, part of what I've learned over the years is that writing is a part of my ministry as a way to connect with the larger church or with ideas that I think are important sharing. And so I was never a kid who grew up thinking I'm going to be a writer one day, but my writing journey publishing journey really began with finding with my first book, Birth, Finding Grace Through Infertility, that there just weren't people writing on the subject in the way in which I wanted to read.
Yeah.
So I had wise people in my life that said, well, why don't you do it? and which of course is sort of annoying. It's not what you want to hear. Why don't you do that? But it really was the right answer, and such was the case with all the projects I've taken on since then.
Yeah, awesome. What would you share about kind of your faith journey? What that's looked like for you?
Well, I grew up as a church kid in Tennessee. My father was a pastor, so we were very, very involved in church. From an evangelical perspective, I grew up in a faith tradition that was very big on doctrine,
Mm-hmm.
teaching the Bible, being at church as often as we could, having all of our summer activities around church. Um, but a really big thing for me happened. It wasn't in the traditional timeline, in sort of the evangelical cadence. Especially in a free church tradition, baptism, when a person makes some sort of profession of faith, like that's
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be the moment for them. I mean, I did that when I was a little kid because I was scared about hell, from what I
Mm-hmm.
heard at BBS. But I did have a moment with God that I really count as real and authentic when I was 12.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of was the shaping force of my teen years. I became that kind of weird kid that was really into spiritual practice and really into um, youth group in a way in which other people weren't. And, I grew up in a tradition where women weren't allowed to be leaders. Um, but I guess to my advantage, when I got into youth group and then we would go on these trips, and part of the experience was sharing. Somebody had to give the church talk about, well, we had this great mission trip or whatever it
Mm-hmm.
was.
You got to do
The
it.
boys did not want to talk, so I ended up being like the go-to speaker.
Yeah.
And I had people tell me when I was in high school, if God had made you a man, you'd be a really good preacher. And I was like, well, I don't want to be a man. So I don't even know why you're telling me this,
Yeah.
because I just had never seen women in leadership positions. But it wasn't until I was almost finished with college, and I was 22, and I saw women preach for the first time, and that really changed my life because I was finally able to realize that maybe what those people have been saying to me all along was possible.
Mm. So this is kind of in the weeds here, but I gotta ask you. When I heard Chattanooga, my mind went to Tennessee Temple University.
Oh
Which,
yeah,
did you have any
yeah.
connection with them? I don't really
No, I
remember.
know of that school, but we played them. I went to a private Christian school, of course, because that's what good evangelical kids do. Chattanooga Christian, and we played Tennessee Temple in basketball and all the sports.
Okay.
So yeah.
I don't remember super well what my connection was, but I just remember as a kid hosting. My dad's church would host groups from Tennessee Temple every once in a while. Um, well, you kind of mentioned writing being an important part of your life. Are there any other things that you'd highlight as important spiritual practices for you?
Well, I have to say that that's always a journey, right,
Hmm.
for everyone in different
Mm-hmm.
stages. I really enjoyed listening to an episode recently you did with Brian McLaren,
Oh, thanks.
and
Yeah.
he was talking about how his spiritual practices had changed over time, and I was like, in my car going, yes, 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 that's me
Mm-hmm.
too. I grew up as a big journaler,
Yeah.
mostly because I didn't have a lot of close friends that understood my sort of spiritual, things that I took
Mm-hmm.
really seriously. And sometimes I would even make up people like friends to write to, and that really
Hmm.
helped me in my teen years. I don't journal as much as I used to. I got into blogging, and then I think I kind of got my social confidence in a way. And as I moved more into adulthood, that I don't necessarily feel like I need to do that. Have I can have conversations with people
Hmm.
in a different way. But I say spiritual direction is a huge practice in my life. I've had the same spiritual director now almost as long as I've been married, which is almost 15 years.
Wow.
And one day she'll retire and I'll be very sad. But,
Hmm.
the practice of being pastored by someone else,
Mm-hmm.
where, there's someone that says, where is God in this situation and who prays with you and for you has been really important.
Yeah.
Um, and here's one kind of silly one, but it's really kind of a big part of my weekly rhythms. I deal with the chaos of a family situation, but I do laundry a lot. Like I really love the laundry.
Hmm.
It's like my favorite household chore, which I know some people
Laundry.
hate it. I will come to your laundry. Is how I feel. Um, but I don't do the laundry on Sundays, which I know
Mm-hmm.
seems like, well, that's silly. But for me, it's like because it's the thing that I, love and do every day, and I'm always, organizing my time around when I'm folding the clothes or whatever. That I just know that there's a pause to that, and for me, that's that sort of Sunday signal of, it reminds me just not just the laundry, but that that everything deserves a rest,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a good reminder in other areas of my life that we can't just do all the things all the time. Um, so
Is there something about this is kind of a weird question, I suppose, but I'm curious. What is it about laundry that find I wonder, is there something more behind it that you find, I don't know, impactful? It's a silly question, I suppose, but
no. Well, here's the Christian writer Kathleen Norris. You familiar
yeah, I've heard
with
the
her?
name.
Yeah, she's. I discovered her when I was in seminary at Duke Divinity School, and she has this great book called, which I often mispronounce. I believe it's called the Quadrian Mysteries, and it's all about. It's very short, but it's all about the work of daily task in our lives. She talks about cooking and dishes and
Mm-hmm.
laundry as being like these for her in her own journey of these like huge spiritual practices, and
Hmm.
the tagline of it is it's the book is women's work, and I can't remember the rest, but the idea that these tasks have been put on women,
Mm-hmm.
through the years of like this is the women take care of the house and these are things women's do, but
Yeah.
what she was trying to do is like highlight for anyone, not just women, how these things can be grounding to us in our
Hmm.
day. Like to think of, in all the great monastic traditions of, doing the dishes. And,
Mm-hmm.
so many have written about that. Or, just teaching, working in the garden or doing something that requires regular maintenance. And I think any of those tasks, going to the grocery store, that's another thing. I have rules about the grocery store as a spiritual practice.
Hmm.
Again, maybe weird, but I don't check my phone and I don't want to go with anyone and I don't want to talk to anyone. There's just something for me about like walking the aisles of the grocery store and being intentional about what I buy and don't buy. Um, it's something we all have to do. Well, maybe we haven't done it as much because of the pandemic,
Yeah.
but it's a grounding practice of I'm here, I'm a human being, I need food. Um, I'm just going to be at peace for this time that it takes me to complete this task. Kind of how I feel about the laundry.
I don't like laundry per se, but I really enjoy matching socks.
Oh, great.
So, I mean, my wife hates matching socks, but for some reason, for me, it's like an adventure to like match socks. And I love like there'll be like just a laundry basket full of socks that my wife will just leave, and I can just sit watching TV and have an adventure of just matching socks and find a lot of fulfillment in matching socks.
See, we got to do those things, that we got to have our socks matching,
Yeah,
otherwise we won't have any to wear. So,
I'm big on matching socks. It seems like more and more folks care about that less and less. Just
well,
yeah. Well, let's move on from hot laundry talk. Let's talk about your book. So Elizabeth has this new book called Brave Church Tackling Tough Topics Together. A lot of T's in there. Brave Church Tackling Tough Topics Together. So tell a little bit about how the book came to be.
well, I mentioned earlier that the first book I wrote was about our infertility journey,
Mm-hmm.
called Birthed. And when I wrote that book, and it came out the end of 2016, I was doing what authors do, which is you go and speak at conferences and churches, and
Mm-hmm.
you are connecting with people. And I really found, much to my surprise, because it felt so it was such an act for me to get to the place where I was okay with sharing this vulnerable story with, anyone who picked up the book, not just, my close friends or family.
Yeah.
And I was ready, I was ready to share with anyone. And I found that there were so many congregations that were really resistant to me talking about infertility because they said, this is really not a topic we like to talk about in church, or maybe there's not enough. There was this perception that there had to be a quota of young people in the room because said older people would not find it interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what I did was I had to start thinking of ways to get myself still invited to these events
Yeah.
and have people come to my, workshops. And so I started doing a lot of work around grief that we don't talk about in church, knowing that infertility is one of those things. And in that, I started to hear just from wider, people all across the country, just story after story of things they felt like if they brought up this subject, that they could not, they wouldn't be welcomed, or their pastor wouldn't know how to deal with it. And I just felt like, well, what if we created a resource, like a guide to help people begin to talk about these things so that these folks that I was meeting, that they would feel less alone and more included in their community.
Yeah, great. Well, in reading the book, obviously the title of the church is Brave Church, and you differentiate between a safe space and a brave space. So I want to hear if you can kind of flesh that out a little bit more.
Sure. So the book starts with 5 guidelines for what it means to be a brave church group. 5 things that you're going to covenant to that will help you have these intentional, difficult conversations around the topics of infertility and miscarriage, mental illness, domestic violence, racism, and sexuality. And the importance of these rules is they counter our ideas around safety in the church. Because if you think about church history, and why does the church exist? It has so much to do with people gathering because, one, they have like-minded ideas about God, faith, the Bible, etc., and because they want a community where they can worship freely and talk about the things that are important to them in a way that they will not feel persecuted. That's why the earliest Christians gathered. And it's a wonderful thing. I mean, we all need safe spaces. Don't hear me say that safe spaces are not good. We all need friends who are safe communities for us. Or if we're a person who's from a minority community in a majority culture that's different, we need those places where we can go and feel welcome just as we are. But the problem with safe spaces, what happens is that we become so safe that we become so closed off from ideas and people who are different from us. And I think the problem in that is that it limits our ministry to be good news. Because if we're just talking amongst ourselves and we're only allowing the loudest voices and we don't have any structure to invite new voices in, if we're only inviting the majority loudest voices into our conversations, that's all we hear. And, you look at where we are as a country right now and what people think of Christians, and there are generally, there's one point of view because those are the voices that are the loudest.
Yeah. So I didn't give you this as a question, but I'm curious. It's coming to mind. Like, I imagine we'd probably both agree that there are some churches that are not even safe spaces in general.
Absolutely.
So do you think that's a continuum? Like they can move from being a safe space to a brave space? And what does that process look like?
I think safety, you need to start with that. You certainly do. And I had some early readers of Brave Church that, are really amazing, thoughtful people that, have communities outside their local church too, where they feel welcome. And they said to me, I love your concept, but my church isn't even safe.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I hear you. I got you. And, yes, we should not, I know as a female clergy, there are some communities that are not safe for me to go into,
Yeah.
I look at what their statements of faith are on their website or who they have in leadership. And I think that will not be a safe space. Let's not go visit there where, we're looking for a church in a community. So I think we have to be mindful of our safety. But I do believe that, churches are not homogeneous in
Mm-hmm.
terms of their beliefs and their ability to be challenged. And Brave Church it is a concept which I hope that leaders will take on and begin to be more brave in their leadership. But I say the magic of Brave Church is a small group experience, a group of 6 to 8 people who will intentionally take on the work of having open hearts to
Mm-hmm.
hear each other in different ways. And I can imagine even in churches that maybe generally may not be safe as a whole, there are some people who are hungry for more.
Hmm.
And to this friend who said, I don't think my church is safe, what I said to her is that I hope Brave Church could be a tool of reconciliation for you and your church. Maybe what you could do is take this book to your pastor and say,
Yeah.
I have, I've had this experience, whatever it may be, of domestic violence, or I've experienced racism, or I've experienced miscarriage, and you've never talked about it. And this has been such a big deal in my story, in my life. And that it would be a way to voice an experience for a person that may not have those words yet to talk about it or know how to bring it up with the leader in the congregation.
I'm curious if I can ask again, I'm a little off topic, but I'm just curious, and I feel like it revolves around this theme. You mentioned kind of the importance of being brave and in groups being brave together. What would you say, like, are there guidelines maybe for the individual, like entering into a space? What is it like being brave entering a space? What are some kind of rules to say, like, hey, this is too dangerous for me, or this is appropriate for me to be brave? Whether it's individually, whether it's a group, like you said, with the book to facilitate conversation. Like, what is kind of some guidelines for folks to be brave without like completely, risking themselves, if that makes sense?
Right. And so you're talking different than the brave space rules that I lay out, but just generally how a person.
Yeah, because I'm wondering, like, if there's an individual who's like a part of a church or wants to be a part of a church and is like, how much should I be brave, and how much should I just say, like, this is not going to work?
Right. Yeah. And I'm not for like just sharing whatever, and you and I both know of these like internet personalities of people who get online every day, right? And they just like, they're going to tell you all kinds of things about themselves that maybe you don't even want to know.
Yeah, don't want to know.
I'm not saying that. That's not brave. Brave is a muscle, that all of us develop. And brave comes with discernment and wisdom. I always go back to my own life. The quote from Pastor Nadia Boltz-Weber, who says that we lead from our scars and not our wounds.
Yeah.
And, you and I probably have seen pastors, and I've been tempted to be this pastor and had to check myself, that quote, bleed all over a congregation. They get up on a Sunday and their sermons are, about, deep in the crazy or the chaos or the pain or whatever's going on in their life, and that's just not appropriate. We need safe spaces to retreat to process that pain and begin to heal from it. But I think, for a person to practice being brave, I think the number one ingredient is to have an open heart to want to be able to share something, even if it's not the whole thing quite yet, something of your own experience that is real with a group. And you also have to have an open heart to other people. It's so easy to get caught up, I think, in, well, I went through this, or I know about this, and so your experience can't be true. And that just shuts down conversation.
Yeah.
so fast. So open heart goes both ways, and can be, um, quite powerful. One of the rules that I ask groups to covenant to if they go through Brave Church is the rule that you ask permission before you challenge someone's views on a subject. And I do that kind of for the reason that you're talking about, the idea that sometimes subjects, while we may have experience in a particular topic, I have experience in infertility and miscarriage. Some days I want to talk about that. Some days I don't, because it's been triggered by something that is painful for me. And so we don't expect, the worst thing is, say you're a mostly homogeneous group and you have one or two members of color in the group, and you put them on the spot and say, okay, will you tell me what it means to experience racism?
Yeah.
Maybe they want to share, maybe they don't, but that's not necessarily always, that's not brave, because it's not giving them the agency to share when they're ready to.
Yeah. You were mentioning about kind of oversharing on Twitter, and I feel like surrounding and enmeshed in this whole thing is the importance of boundaries. And I feel like that's something that I see on Twitter regretfully, and I feel like there's a correlation between people who overshare on Twitter and then several months later get back on Twitter and say that their life is a mess. That's a little bit judgmental, but I feel like there's such an importance of boundaries and knowing what's appropriate to share, kind of knowing where you end and where the other person begins, right?
Right.
I want to let's kind of talk through those your 5 kind of guidelines, and I'll ask some specific questions about these, but I thought it might be helpful just to kind of hit your 5 points. So you have controversy with civility, important distinction.
Yes, please.
Controversy with civility being a good thing, owning your intentions and your impact, challenge by choice, which you just kind of mentioned, respect, which folks hopefully would understand, and then a good one, but simple but important to reinforce, no personal attacks. So I think I would ask, I think the first one immediately, controversy, I feel like 99% of churches are just we're going to run the other way from controversy. And it kind of gets at conflict. In most churches, at least that I've been a part of, I feel like any kind of conflict is a bad thing. And I feel like you're saying that conflict is a good thing. Yes,
I am. Yeah. And that is one of the hardest concepts to really take in. Because, when we do the opposite of this, which is say, agree to disagree to keep the peace, which is something we do so much of in the church and in our culture. What we're doing is we're silencing voices who have something to say and have something we need to hear, but maybe they're not of the majority opinion. And so that's really important, to allow that to bubble up. And that conflict, and I know I've experienced this in my personal life, is the thing that often helps us go deeper in relationships.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about conflicts you've had with partners or friends or family members where you think, oh, that was so dreadful. I didn't want to have that talk. I didn't want to have to spend my day working on this issue. But if you're able to, commit to the way of kindness, which is part of the conflict, that we are accepting conflict, but also committing to kindness. What happens in the end, as you're able to make your way through it, what you find is that you feel closer to that person, and you often have more respect for them. You understand where they come from. And, as much as, we all like to avoid it. I mean, I don't get up in the morning. I mean, I know maybe there are some of these people, but I don't get up in the morning and say, I want to get into a fight with someone today. That will be awesome. Or I want to offend my church today.
They might have other issues they need to work through first, if that's the case.
But when those things happen, you often learn things that you would have never known. You learn what makes people tick. You learn what their values are. People learn that about you, and it can be a powerful tool of relationships.
I don't know if you've read the book Critical Conversations. but it kind of has a similar value of like most people avoid conflicts like the plague. You know, you can get to a point where you're like, you can handle conflicts, and then at some point, like, you almost like welcome conflicts, not as like, you know, like you want to start conflicts, but that you appreciate the opportunity to go deeper with people and work through things. I'm
Yeah.
still not there yet where I want to jump into a conflict necessarily, but I've gotten beyond where I can just avoid it like the plague, at least.
Right. And I mean, and that's the thing, like I've had churches, well, I've had pastors even, this book's been out a month or two, and they're like, oh, I love it, you know, and then they look at it and they're like, oh. But if you do this and you say racism in my church, like there's going to be people who might leave. And I'm
Yeah.
like, well, they might, you
Yeah.
know, but isn't the gospel, mandate us to talk about those who feel most left out and most unwelcome,
Yeah.
and who are not, who experience, prejudice in their daily lives? I mean, like I would rather do that and have people leave. I mean, but it takes kind of some thick skin, and it takes a willingness to have failure,
Mm-hmm.
and to really know your conviction
Mm-hmm.
about why you talk about something. I preached at a church on Sunday, and I was like, yeah, I could have not. I ended up talking about Brave Church as part of the sermon, and I was telling some of the general feedback that I got when I was interviewing people for the book about how much pain I feel like I heard of those um, who have experienced just being unwelcomed in church. And it would have been really easy to not have added that to the sermon, but it was about the Ephesians text about the expansive love of God, about it being so wide and deep and
Mm-hmm.
long. I was like, but we got to go run. I mean, literally run to people who feel this way, because if we truly believe the love of God is wide and deep and expansive, then why are we not allowing it to overflow to those who don't feel that love? And you know, that's what makes me want to be a part of the church, worldwide.
Yeah.
Um, and those people that are not quite there to talk about these things, not that you love them any less, but you just know that this is so important, and because people literally are dying,
Yeah.
people are committing suicide because we don't talk about mental illness. People are dying
Yeah.
because we don't talk about racism. People are dying because they feel like their sexuality is not, welcomed.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, that just fires me up. So
Yeah. Good. Love it. Your second rule is owning your intentions and your impact. And I think this is so important. In the book you wrote, and I wrote these down, we are not our words, but we are responsible for them. And this was probably my favorite line in the book, because I feel like this can be really like a white person thing, probably like really like a white male thing, is like, hey, I'm just saying this. I'm just saying this, like, back, it's like, calm down. It's like, I'm just going to say this and then not like accept any repercussions for what I said.
yeah. Yeah, and no one's saying. I mean, this is not about people going out, to the playground of life and being mean. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that's a whole other topic. We're talking about people who believe they have good intentions for what they said,
Mm-hmm.
that that they are trying to be kind,
Yeah.
and we want to assume the best of everyone. We do, but kind of the counter to this rule is what we say to people. Well, just don't take it so personally, or why do you
Yeah.
have to get so worked up over this?
Yeah.
And that's taking the ownership of our words and putting them on someone else.
Yeah.
But instead, if we take the ownership back on our words and realize, hey, I may not have the worldview or may not have the experiences to really speak the best words. And even if I was trying, I still can make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And I was having a conversation about Brave Church with a predominantly African American church a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about racism. And I felt like I was shaking a little bit in my shoes, because here I am. I am a white person talking about racism with predominantly Black church. But they had so much to teach me about in the stories that they were telling me about their own experiences of racism and how important it is. It's not that they're expecting perfection out of their
Mm-hmm.
friends who are not of color, but they do want to be heard. And
Mm-hmm.
they do want to understand that you're on a journey of learning and listening and willing to say, I'm sorry
Yeah.
if you say something that's offensive.
I wonder, you kind of mentioned at the beginning this idea, or the beginning of that statement, like this idea of like, the words might have good intentions, they might not be received well. Like, is it fair to say like, it can be a both and situation where like, I I may have good intentions and the other person may need to hear me with good intentions, but like I can still be responsible for those words, even if I don't know. Is that fair?
I mean, it is fair. It is fair. But the more I've talked about these
Mm-hmm.
over the past bit, the more I realized that the kind of trajectory of each of these brave church rules is really leaning toward the perspective of those who are not the majority opinion, and of those
Yeah.
who are generally left out. And so, what we're doing with these brave church rules is we're elevating in the conversation the experiences of those who have felt disenfranchised by their own church experience as the
Yeah.
first thing. Not saying that, that if we have good intentions, we may, we're doing the best we can. We're all doing the best we can.
Right.
We're growing up, all of us, have grown up in, institutional systems that have not given us the full story of what it means to be a good human.
Yeah.
I mean, really, it's in the water, and we can't change that, but we can begin to take responsibility for our impact
Yeah.
in the present moment with a person in front of them.
And I think that's the most important thing is just like getting back to what you said, a word responsibility of like owning yourself, being responsible for yourself. I think that's so important. Um, so one other thing is the third thing you say is challenged by choice, and I think about again this idea of boundaries, the importance of boundaries, and then of asking permission. I'm not sure. I want to hear from you, like if these things go together the way I'm thinking them together, but tell more about that if you can.
Well, I think I mentioned on a little bit earlier the idea that we don't want to elevate a person in the room as being like, well, you're going to speak for all people who went through domestic violence, or you're
Mm-hmm.
going to speak for everyone who's been through a miscarriage,
Yeah.
knowing that these experiences are vast and different, and that they often come from a tender place of pain, and that we're not always, just because we're in a group and we're trying to be brave and we're trying to hear one another out, and maybe we need clarification on points at times, then we're not going to just use challenge as an excuse to
Mm-hmm.
berate someone. Challenge can be a good thing. Challenge is, the heart of conflict where we learn, but not everyone's ready to be in the fire at that particular moment.
And I imagine this can go. Excuse me, swallow my coffee down the wrong way.
Oh, that's all right.
I imagine this can go in any direction, right? When I think about as someone who grew up in conservative Christian spaces, this idea of what I would call like forced vulnerability, where folks kind of like forced to share. And I don't know about you, if you would agree, Elizabeth, but I wonder like if we're in a brave space and we're having these brave conversations, is it fair like there might be a white man, an older white man who's like I'm not ready to kind of share my full thoughts on, for instance, race, and is it unfair to kind of force that person to kind of share it? Is that on track?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Yeah, yeah, and I like that phrase, forced vulnerability,
Yeah.
because I think growing up in a church, it's like, are you sure you're saved? Do
Mm-hmm.
you need to rededicate your life again? And it's like, if you're not crying at the worship songs, that somehow,
Yeah.
you're not in love with God. we all have our own, you started talking about spiritual practice. We all have our own ways of connecting with God, and we have our own ways of connecting with people. And there are people in groups that are just not talkers, and maybe they're going to say something that's really profound on the sixth meeting at the end of the meeting. And we're going to wait for that because we're so excited to hear what they have to say. But that's when it's appropriate for them to speak. And to ask them to speak any sooner would not be respectful of their humanity. So.
Yeah. Well, there's two more that I want to kind of squeeze in here. Respect, which we think sounds simple. Respect is respect. But you have this important caveat that we need to find out what respect means to different people. And I imagine this has a lot to do with culture to some extent, right? Like
Absolutely.
What I find respectful may not be what you find respectful.
Right.
And certainly across cultural and socioeconomic differences.
Absolutely. And different regions of the country, different genders, different nationalities, so many congregations, at least in the DC area where I've spent most of my ministry, are multicultural. So you're going to have people that maybe present as African American, but they're not. They're actually African, and so there's going to be different ways in which they're going to want to worship and connect, that it's going to be unique to them. And so, this rule gets at understanding, taking the time to understand what respect looks like for you and what respect looks like for me. That oftentimes, kind of like the love language idea that, everybody knows about how we show affection to one another. And sometimes we're trying to show love, but the other person doesn't receive that kind of love. And so it's kind of like a missed opportunity that happens in my marriage. I'll write him a note, because I love words. And he's like, well, I don't really do notes, I've had to learn, he really likes if I pick up the dry cleaning, that's the thing.
Yeah.
And it's the same with respect, that it's a learning curve with one another.
Yeah. Well, your last one, and I don't want to brush by this too quick, but just for the sake of time, I want to include it. No personal attacks. And it seems like an obvious one, but you have challenge ideas, not people. And I think it can be always so easy to be like in a tense conversation. Like to me, it makes me think of, is it the nonviolent communication of similar concepts, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's one of the reasons why people don't talk about these subjects, because it gets so personal so fast, and we make it about, like, you are a bad person, you're a racist, you're a homophobic person, you're a, whatever it might be. You're just so misguided, and maybe their ideas need some more fleshing out or needs more exposure, but they're not a bad person, and there's nothing that shuts down a conversation faster than, you are this. And a better way to approach it is, I feel when you say this, this way.
Yeah. So, I mean, how, I know we're kind of running over time here, but I'm curious, like, I found in some contexts, like, I understand why, like the term homophobe, like why that's an appropriate term in some contexts, but I've also seen, like, in some contexts, people just, like, I don't know, I'm not even sure how to ask the question. Like, I'm thinking, like, is that where, if you're in a church community where they're talking around LGBT equality, there's some people might be heavily advocating for equality and affirmation, and there's obviously some people who might feel differently against it. Is that where you'd say something like, hey, your ideas or your words can be seen as homophobic? I don't know, because obviously
I think you get at the point of, language can be really, because we all view words differently, it can be very hurtful.
Yeah.
But, when I was writing the sexuality chapter, I really tried, again, this book is not what Elizabeth thinks about all these topics, therefore you should believe.
Yeah.
I hope that's what you got when you read it. That was really my greatest hope. It is here's a plate, here's a platter for you, and please, this is how you talk about it. And ultimately, it's about understanding another person's humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And in the sexuality chapter, I really give you some stories, both of that I've interviewed and people in my own pastoral experiences who have felt left out, who have felt less than, who have been dehumanized because of their choices in sexuality. And for me, that's the thing that I always, want to go back to in that particular conversation is, let's not call each other names, but can we just sit for a minute and sit with this person who identifies, say, as transgender, or who identifies as bisexual or non-binary, whatever it may be. Can we just sit for a minute with their experience and how it is for them to be in the world, what they're going to face, what persecutions they're going to encounter, really for no good reason, other than they're not the norm. Can we just sit with their experience and just take it in? Because I think something powerful happens when we're able. I know it was for me in my life. I didn't grow up in a very open community, and it wasn't until I was in college and beyond that I began to have relationships with all different sorts of people, and it was the humanity that got me. These became my friends. And and I also had the experience of being a person who was called to be a pastor in a tradition and in a family system that really didn't know what to do with that. And when you know that there's something about you, in my case, the ministry is something about me that I can't change. And in the case of folks who identify in the LGBTQ community, and they cannot change this fact about them, is what they say. How are we going to respond to that in love and kindness?
I feel like it gets back to what we talked about at the top. If that would be my rule. If a place can't accept you as a person, you shouldn't be a part of that. And I would never want to ask someone to be a part of a place that can't accept their humanity. And frankly, I don't want to talk to people really who de-affirm people's humanities. That's, to me, that's just beyond unsafe. It's reckless and dangerous and inhumane. But we are way over time, so let's take a break and we'll come back with some closing questions. All right, we're back with Elizabeth Hagan, and Elizabeth, thanks for the conversation. And these closing questions you can take as seriously or not as you'd like to, but if you're Pope for a day, what do you want to do? What does that day look like?
I want to make everyone take a nap. Just chill out. I think we're just, so in this respond to everything 24/7 culture that if we just all just took a moment, and the Pope said, let's just shut it all down, imagine what we might learn and be more present if we could just have a minute of rest, real pure rest.
We're way over time, so I shouldn't say this, but I imagine a scenario in which that the Pope could just institute an hour in each time zone a nap. And what would inevitably happen would be there'd be people who'd work through their nap time, and then we'd just get articles and talking heads talking about how entrepreneurial and productive these people are who work through the nap time.
Right. Yeah, we'd find a way to mess it up, but yeah.
I'm a theologian or historical Christian figure you'd want to meet or bring back to life.
Well, it's a great question, but the first one that came to mind was Dietrich Bonhoeffer. I've always loved his work. I've taught his book Life Together many, many times, and just always admired his story of listening to God even when it cost him his comfort.
Yeah. What do you think history will remember from our current time and place?
Well, in a normal, how can we not? The coronavirus, right? We'll all tell our kids one day, remember kids when we never went to school and we made our own donuts at home and we...
Oh, I need to get into that, making my own donuts at home.
I know that's been our thing. We can now make donuts, but it will definitely be that. And when it comes to the church, we all went on Zoom and Facebook Live and all the things. I think we will always remember the point in which we all had to be televangelists.
Love it. Well, what are your hopes for the future of Christianity?
Innovation, innovation, innovation.
Hmm.
I think the Holy Spirit is always in the business of leading us into new ways to
Amen.
be the body of Christ and with each other. And, that may look very different. And innovation, like being brave in church, is scary because we feel like, we may fail, this may not work. But I don't think we should be embarrassed by a failure or trial and error of things, but that, the the church, I hope, will keep evolving and being what our time and place needs it to be.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for this brave conversation, I think.
Thank
And
you for asking
where can
me.
people find out more about you?
Well, you can easily find out about me on elizabethhagan.com. It's Hagan. And if you want to know more about Brave Church, it's elizabethhagan.com/Brave Church. You mentioned Twitter. I always love a good Twitter conversation. I've made so many like real and life friends
Hmm.
over Twitter because you never know who you're going to meet.
Yeah.
So look me up on Twitter as well.
What's your handle? What's your handle then?
It's Elizabeth Hagan. Only one H in between.
All right. Well, the book is Brave Church: Tackling Tough Topics Together. So, encourage you to check it out, and for your faith community especially, would be great for any faith community. So, thanks so much, Elizabeth, for your time, and may God's peace be with you.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks for joining us on the Future Christian Podcast. To learn more about Lauren or the podcast, visit future-christian.com. One more thing before you go. Do us a favor and subscribe to the podcast. And if you're feeling especially generous, leave a review. It really helps us get the word out to more people about the podcast. The Future Christian Podcast is a production of Torn Curtain Arts and Resonate Media. Our episodes were mixed by Danny Burton, and the production support is provided by Paul Romig-Levitt. Thanks, and go in peace.